Hello, everyone. My name is Emma Hausman, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm the program manager for Xylem Watermark and our community impact work all around the world. So luckily at Xylem, I get to work on our nonprofit partnerships and our fantastic volunteering programming through Xylem Watermark. And so today, the focus of our conversation is one partner in particular of ours, Engineers Without Borders, and the skills-based volunteer work that we get to do with them, with colleagues around the world. So today we're really going to be focusing in on the impact that's made through skills-based volunteering, focusing in on this partnership and talking in particular about our signature project in Malawi focused on rehabilitating health clinics. So I'm joined by some fantastic colleagues today who I'll introduce in a moment. But first, I'm just going to give a little bit of background. So regarding Engineers Without Borders, Xylem Watermark brought them on as one of our global nonprofit partners in 2019. And Engineers Without Borders believes that every community has the capacity to sustainably meet their basic human needs. And so they work to match skilled professionals and engineering students around the world with communities that may need their services and partner with those communities to build out projects that have long-lasting sustainable impacts and can be maintained by the communities themselves. And across the world, Xylem employees and our partners are working with Engineers Without Borders, or as you'll hear me often say in today's session, EWB. And we're working with local communities on projects that are in particular improving their access to water and sanitation. And we're focused right now on mobilizing hundreds more colleagues to get involved in these efforts. And employees who are part of what we're calling our Xylem corporate chapter with EWB. They're currently focused on a signature project in Malawi, as well as other projects, and we're looking to bring on new volunteers to join additional projects and efforts. First, we'll focus on this rural health clinic in Malawi, though. Too often, rural health facilities are disproportionately lacking access to adequate water, sanitation, and hygiene, and the infrastructure to maintain that. And these resources are really important for health workers and the people that rely on these clinics. So I'm excited to share a little bit more on this project later. But first, let me introduce the leader of our Xylem chapter for Engineers Without Borders, Samanti Zaman. Samanti here, hi Samanti, is an application engineer with Xylem. She's based in North Carolina. Welcome, Samanti.
Hey, thanks so much, Emma.
Thanks. So to kick us off, I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on Engineers Without Borders. The special thing about them really is this unique platform that exists to provide engineers to communities that may not have the resources to develop solutions, and it really supports sustainable change. So tell us how that has worked in practice with our Xylem team so far.
Yeah, so, Engineers Without Borders is such a great opportunity for people to work together and contribute a ton of different skills, whether it's engineering or not. I think the name tends to be a little misleading, but really when you think about, Engineers Without Borders, it's not just the technical aspect, it's a lot of different things that come together to complete a project, on any given project, whether it's here in Malawi, wherever. You're talking about like contracts and inspections and approvals, like government grants, et cetera. So there's so many things that come into play when we talk about a project. So I think like one of the great things about, being on EWB and seeing the Malawi projects come together is just, it gives us a view of all of the different challenges that could come up. So even during my short time here, coming to these projects pretty late, I've seen the team kind of adapt and grow while discovering pretty dynamic solutions to their problems. One of the things that's really important is making sure that the work in Malawi can be maintained. So that's where, it's our partnership with our local NGO partners comes into play. Because like when we come in, we have a certain expectation and plan that, okay, well, here are our challenges and this is how we want to tackle it. But once we actually get in there, we can see that these resources aren't available. We can't ship these products over there. We don't have anyone to maintain these products over there. So we have to come up with solutions on the spot to make sure that everything is working properly and make sure that it can be maintained. We talked about this a lot, that we don't just want to build a solution and leave it be for, we want to make sure that it works years and years later. So, working with our local NGO partners, they really understand the dynamic of the region. They understand what's available, and it's a huge relief to have them there, because we know that we're giving them the best solution that we can, given these constraints and what is available. But we know we also have somebody there just in case there's emergencies that need to be addressed. So I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from being a part of EWB.
Awesome. Fantastic perspectives. Thank you, Svanti. And we'll hear a little bit more from you later on ways that our colleagues can get involved in the chapter and some next steps for the growth there. So thank you. But then
thank you.
To speak more on this project in Malawi that you were speaking of, I'd like to introduce the leader of the signature project, Vinesan Govender. Vinesan is an engineering manager in Xylem South Africa business unit. Welcome.
Hi, Emma. Thank you for having me. And
Absolutely.
hello to everybody that's tuned in.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the conditions in Malawi and of these health facilities before we partnered with EWB and local nonprofit organizations to tackle this water and sanitation issue that they're facing.
Sure. In 2020, I visited Malawi with the EWB team, and that's where I first got to see the conditions at these clinics. We tried to get through as many clinics as we could. We got through 8 these clinics, although they are around a 30-kilometer radius from the central district of Zomba. There's no paved roads to get to these clinics, and so it is really difficult to get to them. So logistically, it is not easy to access these clinics, which tells you a lot that the people that go to these clinics do not have the opportunity to get to the main town. So these clinics are really their first line of healthcare. In particular, I visited Chamba and Mambo clinic. These are the 2 clinics that Chamba is the clinic that we completed recently, and Mambo is the clinic that we're currently busy with. And I often use the statement that the conditions in these clinics would either motivate you or debilitate you, because that's how strong the emotions are when you visit these clinics. To really see the hardships our fellow human beings are going through is really, really tough. These clinics, on average, service a catchment of around 30 to 40,000 people. Chamba in particular is around 32,000 people. And Chamba Clinic in particular had no running water. So these clinics are facilitating childbirth for almost 60 births per month. They're facilitating the under or the 5-year-old healthcare program, and also general healthcare to the community. And they're doing it with no running water. Water is bucketed to the clinic from a nearby community well. There is absolutely no sanitation. The sanitation at the clinic is just a series of pit latrines. So really, really dire conditions, Emma.
Absolutely. And I mean, these are in no way simple issues that you're tackling. Are there, any that were your biggest concern, or any challenges that you faced that were kind of most pressing for you, or any time you felt overwhelmed a little bit?
Overwhelmed, definitely. But I must say, I'm just the face of a very big team, a very resourceful team, a very resilient team. And they're really the heroes of the story. We chose the Chamba Clinic because it was in the worst condition. And our biggest challenges was getting a dedicated water source. So identifying, at the moment, the clinic was getting water from a well that is shared with the community. So we needed to find for the clinic a dedicated water source, a borehole point. And this required a lot of investigation and negotiating with neighboring landowners, the community, to identify a suitable spot. We also had to look for a place that probably was not contaminated through all of these pit latrines. And this was really, really difficult, given that we had no access to site. Travel restrictions were in place by that time because of the COVID pandemic. So this was by far one of our biggest challenges. Other challenges were getting site information, trying to lay out the site, trying to get data points and so forth for the hydraulic calculations that we actually needed to do. And all of this, I must say, we had a team of engineers and non-engineers, but nobody in this team actually worked in a healthcare facility. So we had to relearn or learn standards of what needed to be applied, best practices, and so forth. So really quite a challenging, lots of challenging. And I must say, back to your question of, did it felt overwhelming? Yes, it did. Absolutely. But I think that what I would like to say, what got us through is momentum. We always kept the momentum. Sometimes in the wrong direction, but we always kept the momentum. And that momentum really, I believe, is what took us over the finish line.
Oh, that's awesome. And as you said, it takes a strong team effort to take on something like this. So could you tell us a little bit more about the team that stepped up for this challenge? Maybe, you said some of them don't even have the background that might have equipped them specifically for this project, but what do you think motivated them to get involved?
Firstly, I must say we have a really diverse team. Our team is diverse in physical location, race, creed, culture, background, expertise, engineering, non-engineering. So I think we really are the epitome of a diverse team. And that diversity, I believe, is what really was our biggest strength. There was always a means to pass the baton on when we had a challenge. And that's what continuously kept the motivation. The other aspect, and I mentioned this before in a previous chat, is I really felt the power of empathy. I felt that power of empathy and its connection to agility and resilience come through. I've had it on many occasions where the team were first facing really tough conditions, personal challenges because of the pandemic. These were unknown circumstances to many of us. Most of the countries were in lockdown. We were fearful for what's going to be happening next. But the team always related back. And this is the brilliance of the team, a team that has not even been to site, but just from their remote volunteering, was able to identify and be empathetic to the community and what they were going through, and always put the community above. They always came back to me with statements like, it's tough, but we can't give up now. If we had to give up, the community is going to suffer. And that, I think, is a real strong point of this team.
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds like really the Xylem spirit coming through there. So I think a lot of our colleagues will resonate that and feel that as well. So once this team is together and working hard and supporting each other, can you talk about some of the steps that you then had to take to, take on the challenge and bring water to this clinic?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I jump into that, I think I want to frame it with an anecdote from our lead engineer on the team, Devet van Vuren. And he mentioned, and I'm going to say open quotes, designing the Malawi clinics presented its own challenges, but what drove and inspired me was that in today's technologically driven world, people still do not have running water. This was also not something happening in another world, but in the same continent I call home, Africa. To change tomorrow, you need to start today. Thank you, EWB and Xylem Watermark, for the enriching experience. God bless Africa. And that for me just frames the team. This team took on design, procurement, construction of a complete water and sanitation system. We put up the design of a new dedicated borehole system, which required the remote collaboration with contractors to identify a site using the tools that we had without being able to travel, things like Google Maps and Google Earth and WhatsApp and phone messages and pictures. You would be amazed with some of the out of the box thinking that the team went through to get and harvest data. And they use this so brilliantly to evaluate the new site and then evaluate remotely hydrological surveys and so forth. We took on some big scope of building a brick and mortar tank stand, the designs for it, and then the construction of that. The new ablution facility, so a complete sanitation system that includes flushing toilets and new septic system. So really a complete solution for wash into this clinic, Emma.
Oh, that's so awesome. And you and Samanti have both mentioned so far, working with a local nonprofit on this partnership too. So in addition to Engineers Without Borders, they've paired us up for this project with a local partner, Freshwater Project International. And I'm wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about this collaboration and how that dynamic works and how it has supported the project.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the most important relationships and collaborations that this project had or has. They really transformed from just being an advisory to the actual hands and legs that perform the work. So I cannot emphasize high enough the importance of having local intelligence on a community, having understanding of the culture that you're walking into, so that you're not intrusive, but that you are collaborating, that you're working with the community to enhance their lives. And the local NGO that is so au fait with this type of intelligence and the culture is key to the success. The local expertise that they have, understanding where the resources are, leverage these resources from, how to leverage it, how to access local materials, vendors, local standards of what you need to comply to, local interacting with governmental organizations, because there's always red tape when it comes to these type of projects. This is the value that this relationship had brought. And not to mention, having them in country do a lot of the work. Our original plan was to have Xylem volunteers go to site, but we had to pivot very quickly to having local resources do the work. And this was the NGO. And this was primarily due to the pandemic. But we saw the value, we saw the higher value of using these local resources and the ingenuity that also came through from that. We actually ended up learning quite a bit that is really preparing us for the clinics that we are tackling now.
So I think that's a really great point, in that, one of the reasons we leaned so heavily on this local partner at the beginning was because of COVID-19. But I think the lessons we've taken away from that have been, that these types of relationships are really what make a project successful. And there's certain areas that maybe before we would have leaned in more or had people on site where it might not have actually been necessary. And learning from this partner where they can, play a role and we can best play a role as well, has been really interesting for me to watch as this team has worked through that. And, as you said, COVID definitely was something that, affected this project pretty early on, but as we were laying out our plan and our scope, it was not something on our radar. And so are there any other ways that you felt, COVID either really impacted these clinics and the folks working there, or just the project itself that we had to overcome?
Oh, absolutely, Hamid. COVID was by far the biggest contributor to the challenges that we faced. The original timeline to finish this clinic was, the first clinic was 7 months, and we budgeted that seven months as in 3 months of work and probably around 4 months of design and exploration and so forth. It took us almost 1 year and 9 months to finish this clinic. That's the impact the pandemic brought through. And achieving this was still no mean feat. The repercussions of the pandemic were far and great. We had no way to travel to site. We had no data. I went to site on a rapid assessment, but we had no measurements, no way of verifying measurements. We had to just work off information that's been WhatsApp to us, WhatsApp video call. And remember, we have very, very limited infrastructure for data communication in a lot of these points. So we also had to change our modus operandi. We had to really, really extend to the limit the tools that we had. Basic tools, but we were so dependent on things like Google Earth and WhatsApp and phone calls. This was the pinnacle, or this was our linchpin of collaboration tools, should I say. We also had to pivot, as I said before, our volunteers from being on site to being almost like a big brother. So we had to reskill ourselves into how do we manage the work from a remote location? How do we bring through the value of our knowledge and skill and quality, but without doing it ourselves? It's easy to do something yourself. It's very difficult to get something done through somebody else at the same quality. And our volunteer team really came through shining colors on this one. And also, with the help of the NGO, and because of really strained logistical channels, we had to improvise on materials. We had to really maximize the use of local and salvaged materials because we couldn't get things into the country. So, and we had to really employ lots of manual construction methods as well. All these learning curves, the team just seemed to absorb it in their stride. And I think that again just speaks to their strength.
Oh, that's awesome. Absolutely. Well, I mean, it must have been a great feeling. I know that we're still working on another clinic and this project is continuing, but having finished this first one in Chamba must have been a really rewarding feeling for the whole team. And interesting too, to see, as you've been working with this community and this clinic for a long time now, you must be able to see a real difference from before when they didn't have any access to water and sanitation. Now having this access, what else has changed for them? Are they, how has this affected the life of the doctors, nurses, and staff, and the patrons of the clinic as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to give it to you in three parts. First, the team. There was an absolute feeling of elation, and the team has a sense of pride of what they were able to accomplish. And rightfully so, they did it under such challenging conditions, and they had no playbook to go through. They created the playbook. So every one of this team has this sense of fulfillment. I can tell you personally, we tend to refer to it as the wagon wheel of life. Every spoke in this wagon wheel brings you some type of completion, but there's no greater spoke or stronger spoke than a sense of fulfillment when you give back. And that's what this project completion has brought to us and the team. In terms of the community, but in particular, the people of that work at the clinic, giving them these facilities really just put a bounce in their step. These are people that are working in these really tough circumstances by choice, not because they have to. And when they see these facilities being put out, it makes their life so much easier. It takes one less stress off their plate. And it really gives them that sense of motivation to continue, that they're not alone in this, that they have support. Finally, I want to just frame it all by saying that, water gives you life, but sanitation gives you dignity. And we have managed to bring both through to this clinic.
Oh, I love it. And I mean, you can see from the smiling faces behind you of folks at the clinic, the completed tank stand behind me, and then you'll see running water on Smonty's background as well. I think these are just a little bit more evidence of the great work that's occurred and the impact it's had on the community. So a really powerful message, and hopefully will inspire others to get involved in this kind of work and show the ripple effect that something like this can have on all elements of life in a community.